All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. This is the Virginia Tech Carilion Wilderness Medicine Journal Club series. This is our February 2024 session on base station medical provider. We are joined by three medical providers who have worked and three separate Antarctic bases. I'm going to hand off to Bree, who's one of our fellows, to introduce our speakers, and then we'll get started.
Hey, so we have a great group of speakers today. I'm very excited to have them talk to us about their base medicine experiences. We have Dr. George Wortley. He's also FOM. He served as the winter over physician at Palmer Station in 2017. He initially thought that Antarctica would be a once in a lifetime event for him, but then he was offered the 2019 winter over position at the South Pole. Even though he retired in 2021 after a 41-year career of family medicine, he was called back on 2 weeks' notice to the summer physician at the South Pole in 2022 to 23. It seems the adventure never ends. Then we have Teresa. Teresa is a physician assistant from Buffalo, New York. She's been practicing for 13 years, mainly in urgent care, family medicine, remote medicine. She loves incorporating her love for travel and extreme places with her job. When she's not working, she can be found rock climbing, skiing, and riding her bike everywhere. All right, and Eric Olson, who's new to our PA gang at Franklin and in Roanoke. He is a Michigan native that grew up spending the summers on the Great Lakes before joining the Army. He settled in North Carolina and worked as an EMT and volunteer firefighter before going to PA school. After becoming a PA, his first job was in emergency medicine. He moved to Roanoke, Virginia, and started working in neurosurgery. This is when he became associated with the Blue Ridge Venture Medicine, so that's our group, BRAM, and started volunteering as a medical support for local races. This was where he met Dr. Wortley and started hearing stories about Antarctica. After a few more years, an opportunity presented itself to head to Antarctica and be the South Pole Station PA for the long, dark, cold winter of 2023. So those are our amazing speakers today. We'll kick it off with Dr. Wortley. Oh, you're muted, Dr. Wortley.
Okay, let me see if I can share the screen. Now let me share the PowerPoints. If that would. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
You know, a question that I often get asked, and believe me, I've asked myself this many times, is why? Why would anyone in their right mind ever choose to winter at the South Pole? I mean, it is probably the most remote and austere location on planet Earth. There is 6 months of darkness during the winter, 6 months of sunlight in the summer, and it's really cold. I mean, I think the cold, even in the summer I was at the pole, the warmest temperature I saw was 13 below zero. And during my winter over, I think the coldest I was ever outside in was minus 107 with a wind chill of minus 153. And you can't leave. The last flight out of the pole for the winter is historically today, February 15th, and there's no one coming to get you till almost the 1st of November. So you can't decide 2 months into this that I don't like this, I'm leaving. It's not, that is just impossible. And to make things even worse, you're only allowed 2 2-minute showers per week. But on the other hand, it is remote and austere, but it's really beautiful. And actually, it's the remoteness which I think is the attraction to most of us. And yes, it is dark for 6 months, but the stars and the auroras are just absolutely spectacular. And these will go on for days at a time. You get to be part of cutting edge science. That little orange donut you see there, that's the first image ever of a black hole And our South Pole telescope was a huge part of that. That other kind of turquoise oval is a map of the cosmic microwave background, which we do at the South Pole with our scopes. And that's actually a baby picture of the universe with the afterglow of the Big Bang. And then we have the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory, really the universe's premier neutrino observatory, seeing things that we have never seen before in space. And you get to be part of a crew, 24 of the most interesting, fascinating, adventurous people that you would ever meet on planet Earth. So yes, it is worth doing, but it's not without its hardships. Now, let me just say a brief word on what qualifications do you need to be selected. Now, these are for physicians, and maybe, I don't know if Eric has any other ideas on, for the PAs or whatever, but the minimum qualifications are you have to have a medical license in any state will work. You need to have a DEA registration. You need to be a U.S. citizen with a U.S. passport. You have to have BLS, ACLS, and ATLS, which is advanced trauma life support. And you have to have skills in suturing, splinting, IV insertion, and airway management. And they want to see, I think I just messed up my slideshow, didn't I? They want to see 3 years of practice experience. Now, the things that will move you up to the head of the list, uh, they like people that are board certified in either emergency medicine or family medicine. And I think the physicians, it's pretty equal between the two. I can think of one general surgeon who's been to the pole, but he's kind of old school and has been doing Antarctic medicine for probably a good 15, 20 years. And they're looking for people that have experience working in remote environments with limited medical support. And I think being a fellow of the Academy of Wilderness Medicine probably got me noticed and helped in getting me my first gig in Antarctica. And that's about all I have to say for now. And I'll turn it over to Eric.
Hey, Eric, you're muted.
Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. I'm one of the PAs. I actually just got back from spending last winter, so the Southern Hemisphere winter at the South Pole. So I got back in November. I'd been there January through November. And I'm trying to. It was really awesome. Trying to pull up my settings here to be able to share the screen with you guys. Okay. All right. We see that now?
Looks good.
Okay. So here we have the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. I was there for the winter, got back in November. It was an awesome time. I got handoff from George, actually. So that was really cool. But this is me not really knowing what was in store for me, landing at McMurdo Station. And I think Teresa might be able to tell us more about McMurdo because she actually worked there. The rest of us just passed through. But this is landing at McMurdo. That's Mount Erebus in the background. A little bit about me, as Bree mentioned for us. I've been a PA for about 6 years now. I was in the U.S. Army, volunteered as a firefighter, and worked as an EMT previously. Started my career in emergency medicine and then transitioned to neurosurgery here in Roanoke. Got associated with this great group, the Blue Ridge Adventure Medicine, where I was doing the volunteer work, met Dr. Wortley, and that ultimately led to this really cool assignment. So that is Dr. Wortley and I at the ceremonial South Pole station, or the ceremonial South Pole. We make that distinction because there's the ceremonial pole and then also the geographic pole. We've got this one set up. It's great for photos and everything directly in front of the station. But it is not the actual location of the axis of the Earth. That moves every year because the station and this pole marker here, all the flags are on a sheet of ice about 2 miles thick, and that is constantly moving. So it moves about 30 feet a year. So every year they've got to pick up the pole marker and move it 30 feet, drill a hole and stick the thing back in the ground. So this one stays where it is, just so everybody can have some consistency. But we arrived in January. That last plane leaves mid-February, just like Dr. Wortley mentioned. It was that rather fitting that we're doing this right now because today, or yesterday for us, but the 15th for them was their close of station. So now there's no more flights in or out. The other big mile markers or milestones for the station down there is the setting of the sun. It only happens once a year. That's about March 21st. Then you've got midwinter in June. That'll be you don't notice any difference when you're there, but it's your halfway point, and so you know that the sun will slowly start coming back. It's just spiraling. Below the horizon, it spirals farther and farther and farther from the horizon, and then it hits midwinter and it starts spiraling back closer to your horizon. Finally rises again September 21st, so that's a pretty big deal. And then you expect your first planes to land anywhere around the end of October, beginning in November, depending on the weather and mechanical issues with the planes. So you wait for your usually you wait for your replacement to get in, and then you have a nice week or two of handoff with them to make sure everybody's trained up and ready to go, because then they will be taking over as the station medical team. So it's a pretty big deal to be able to be comfortable and know what to expect. What you will have to do if you're practicing as a base medicine, station medicine anywhere, is be very flexible. You'll be wearing many hats. You'll be asked or maybe expected to pitch in doing a lot of things that you might think aren't necessarily your job. I did a lot of shoveling, cleaning, refilling drink machines, wiping down tables, refilling napkins, learning new skills on non-medical things. And then on the medical side, you are everything. At the South Pole Station, it's you and for us, it's a PA, nurse practitioner, and a physician. So between the two of you, you function as the nurse, the phlebotomist, X-ray technician, ultrasound technician, running the lab, running pharmacy, doing anything related to dentistry. And then you are also the anesthesiologist, the surgical tech, the scrub tech. You're doing it all. Hopefully you're not doing surgery though. Personal resiliency is key to be able to successfully function throughout this whole endeavor. They do try to, the United States Antarctic Program does try to prepare people to handle these sort of interpersonal interactions involved with base medicine through team building exercises. I think I spent 4 days in Colorado before heading down there, learning a lot of great skills to help deal with people when you can't leave and you don't have any option except to manage stuff. So this is your dental chair at the South Pole. It is something that unfortunately we got a lot of use out of. I didn't have any background in dentistry before I went down there, so it was a learning on the job kind of thing. It makes me very appreciative of my local dentist. I would ask any of you to thank your dentist next time you see them, because it is not something that I would ever want to be responsible for again. Ultrasound, we have a very nice machine down there, but again, everything is reliant on the internet. So you've got for us, we had 2 satellite passes that were strong enough to support decent internet connections. And so you take all your pictures, save them to your computer, and then email them when you get an internet window. So that's something that makes Antarctica unique, is that one other resource that you don't realize that you've got to be aware of and keep tabs on. You're emailing everything to your consultants and then waiting for them to get back to you. It's kind of hard to see here, but this is our main bed that we use to treat patients on. And this setup here, kind of on the right side of the picture, is the portable X-ray machine. So that yellow box up there is the part that generates the radiation to shoot the films. There's the plate there on the bed. So you position that behind whatever you're going to shoot. You pull out a textbook. You can see that on the bed there as well, to help you position the patient to get whatever best views you need. And that is also not an easy thing, to get that perfect mortise view of the ankle or the laterals and the APs. And the book that we had there did offer a lot of little suggestions on how to position them, or add a little block underneath this to get the angle perfect, and that was rather helpful. And then the cut sheet tells you how much radiation or how strong of a beam of radiation to shoot, and then the distance of that to your plate, which was actually a lot of fun to learn to do. And then you take that cassette over to your developer, do this all, just as you've got the patient sitting there on the bed. Develop your films, make sure it looks acceptable to you. If you need to, you've got to reset, shoot another one, take a look, see what it is. And then again, you're waiting on that internet connection to upload those images to your consultant. We do a lot of independent reads though, because you've got to work in real time. So really, you're just waiting for confirmation of what you're already suspecting. The lab. This was another new skill for me, but it was a lot of fun. Made me remember the undergraduate days in biology and chemistry, where you're doing it all yourself, working with reagents if need to, or pipetting. So we've got a series of machines here. The one on the far left is our CBC, then the Piccolos, the BioFire machine that does our like COVID panel, the respiratory viral PCRs. We've got a couple iStats, the Quidel. So each of these machines gives us different tests specifically. So they're all run differently. They've got different cartridges that you got to learn how to manage, and they're all very finicky. You can't have air bubbles in them, and sometimes you've got to just start over after you've invested a good 10-15 minutes in trying to get your sample run. But that's part of working remotely like that. So here we have the agitator down there in the first picture. And then this is one of the QBC samples for our CBC machine. And then you're doing monthly QA QCs on everything to make sure that your internal controls are still working. Pharmacy was a big project. A lot of the medicines, it's a big investment for who's ever purchasing the medications, because you've got to have them all on hand in case something goes wrong. But then thankfully, you don't always have to use them. So things build up, they expire. You've got to rotate through your stock, try to manage what gets moved, shuffled out of the main stores into the emergency caches. And then the whole thing is kind of looked after by this computer program. So your pharmacy techs and your pharmacists are doing a lot of work that we're not aware of, as far as pulling up these individual identification numbers on all the meds and looking for drug interactions, and then verifying the meds with each patient. So that was another cool thing to learn, and then appreciate those other parts of our healthcare team that you might not always know are playing such an active role for you. Surgery. So we've got all of our different instrument packs sterilized and just waiting, hopefully, to never be used again. But you're doing it all. You're sterilizing everything in these packs with an autoclave. So if you do have to break something open, then you've got to clean it, re-sterilize it, have it packaged, ready to go again in case the worst happens. And you've got to convert your little clinic there into a sterile surgical bay, if need be. So me with I have a background in neurosurgery. It's a little hard to see through the reflections of the plastic here, but this is some of what we've got for cranial procedures. You've got a hand drill, a couple different burrs, and a giggly saw. So you can do burr holes and craniectomies that way. It would not be my first choice. Definitely not here in a well-staffed operating room at a major level 1 trauma center, and definitely not at the South Pole when you're 3 weeks away from any kind of medevac after you've initiated. Patient transport is an interesting idea down there too. You've got the main elevated station, but there's several outbuildings. There's even parts of the elevated station that drop down under the ice, good 30 to 60 feet under the ice, that are connected with a vertical tower that's, I think, 7 flights worth of stairs that would be built for trying to bring a patient up, because that is not heated. That is just the ambient temperature. Generally, when you're deep under the ice, like within the arches, it maintains a temperature of around -60 year round, I think. But then in that tower, it's just thin corrugated metal. You can see it on our pictures. It's just or not freestanding, but it's just standing along the side of the building. That is whatever the ambient temperature outside is. So that's not where you want to have a patient. You can move them quicker, actually just going out one of the main archways that the heavy equipment operators use to get our big tractors out, and then bring them around to one of the main entrances of the building. And we do that with this Nansen sled. The Nansen sled is named after one of the original Antarctic explorers. I think, well, he was Arctic as well as Antarctic. But this is a very efficient sled, and it runs really well on the snow and ice down there. It's modified here to be used for patient transport to hold this litter, holds it very tightly with our quick links and chain tensioners. It's very secure, but you got to bundle your patient to protect from the elements. And then this is either man-hauled with up to 4 people just pulling a strap across their chest, or pulled behind a snowmobile if it's warm enough. The snowmobiles can't run below, I think it's -60, 70, -70, somewhere around there, depending on who the operator foreman is and how they're feeling that day, probably the situation itself. But there's a good chance that one of the ERT, the emergency response teams, is just going to be pulling your patient for you from the accident site, the injury site, back to the station where you can do some more help for them. I think a lot of people here in this wilderness group have had experience, or at least heard about gamma bags. And so it was fun to be there on station and have access to these, because it's something that I had only heard about previously. So then I got to play around with them and put people in them and see who is claustrophobic that didn't know they were claustrophobic beforehand. But it's for altitude illness, we are above that threshold where you can get some altitude related illnesses, where the station itself is at 9,301 feet. However, the physiologic altitude varies greatly, just depending on the weather. So I think that our minimum physiologic altitude was never less than 10,000 feet. So that's what the person is actually feeling while they're in there. So if you do have somebody and you're unable to evacuate them because we don't have access to a flight that day, or the weather's just too bad, you can temporize them, potentially get them through whatever illness they're experiencing just within the gamma bag, or help them limp by until we can evacuate them back to sea level on the coast at McMurdo. But that was actually a lot of fun. Doing station medicine really helps you to appreciate your surroundings. For me, the auroras were the coolest thing probably that I've ever seen out in nature. The southern sky is also really beautiful. I had never seen the Southern Cross before, and that's my predominant landmark. Every time I walked outside throughout that 6 months of darkness, I look up, find that, and then kind of look around further. But otherwise, the having no day-night cycles was another really interesting thing that you just enjoy while you're there because it's so unique, and you're likely not going to experience that a whole lot of other times in your life. So I just had to include some really cool pictures that I took. You walk outside and the sky's just green and moving. It's just waving above you, swirling patterns. And you'll see the snow is lit up red down there. Dr. Wortley started mentioning the science that we do or that is done there. And any white light interferes with the science collection. So any light that you're going to use on there has to be red lights. So you're not, unless it's like an emergency, you're lost out there, something's gone horribly wrong, you use red lights. Having a white light turned on is an indication to anybody that might be out there that you need help and to come help, like drive a machine out there. This was a cool picture to be able to capture. You see some purples and reds in this picture. And that was something we were always hoping to get with the auroras that day. It's hard to think that you maybe get a little tired of the green. So having a little variation with reds and purples was fun. And there's also a little bouldering gym that I was able to go and climb around once a week. That was my Sunday routine. I'd go out there and spend a couple of hours having some fun here. This is as big as it is. You can very easily touch the ceiling. The routes are many years old, so you just kind of, I'm sure some people will redo the routes, but that was not something I was going to do. So you just have fun. You find the routes that you like to climb and just do them over and over, or try to challenge yourself with others. One of the other guys that was really good at climbing, he was quite a bit shorter than I am. And so there were some that, he would be very technical about and spend a couple of weeks working on, and then I'd be able to just go out there and reach past whatever that difficult spot was that had been holding him up. And that always frustrated him, but it made me chuckle. So here we are. This is hard to see it, but a big old smile on my face there. The sun is rising in the background. This is a couple of days after sunrise. And so that's when you know that your time providing medical coverage, station medicine is starting to come to a close. And it's a really fun experience. Grateful to be a part of it. And that was me walking out to the plane on the last day. There's no barbers, so you either learn to cut your own hair or let it go. And I, for the most part, just let all my hair grow out. So that's what I've got for you guys.
Thanks, Eric. Any questions based on all the cool stuff he was telling us about, guys?
Are we back to me now?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
take it away. I think share screen should still be enabled.
Yeah.
There was one
Yeah.
question in the chat, if we want to address that real quick, from Megan. What kind of illnesses do you see on the daily?
Interestingly, you often went several days without having any patients. After the station closes, you're all kind of used to each other's germs. So there's no more new viruses being spread around. People aren't as susceptible to things. So URIs, are there a problem in the shoulder seasons and probably in the summer as well? But then after that, it's urgent care, primary care type stuff. A lot of repetitive use injuries like wrist, elbow, shoulder pain from people that are doing all the hard work within the station, keeping everybody alive. We actually had several people with long-standing diagnoses of like plantar warts that never got fixed. And with a nearly unlimited supply of liquid nitrogen, we learned how to do wart removal, which was kind of fun. And then you use the leftover liquid nitrogen to freeze stuff and smash it to help pass the time.
Actually, we use the leftover leftover liquid nitrogen to make margaritas. They make good slushies.
I tried to
Um,
make it flushy once and it just froze solid.
Nice. And then TJ asked, I know you mentioned about the internet being kind of spotty, but can was internet there most days, or how was, getting internet?
Yeah, internet is one of the things that people focus on most. It's like a hour by hour conversation almost, because there are only, when I was there, when I first got there, we had three internet three satellite passes. So three different satellites that would come up over the horizon and be within view that we could access. One of them was very poor. It was only strong enough to get a voice call through or to support your official email. And then the other two were closer to what you'd think of as like a pretty strong dial-up speed, maybe DSL for, back in the early 2000s. So it was, you get used to it and you really appreciate it. You feel like that's the good internet when that comes up. And that's when you're doing most of your stuff. Over the winter, for us, there's 43 people. So that volume could sustain having people stream stuff on YouTube if they needed to, or set download speeds kind of low and then download a new episode of a TV show or something if they had access to that. But otherwise, you knew exactly what time of the day your satellite was going to come up, and you knew exactly when it was going to come down, and you had to plan all of your communications with family and friends accordingly. There's something called the sidereal day. It's actually the revolution of a satellite around the Earth is 4 minutes slower than like our 24-hour day, because of the movement of the Earth around the sun that makes up those last 4 minutes. So the satellites are rotating at a constant rate around you, but your internet window is shifting by 4 minutes every day. It gets earlier into the day, 4 minutes. And so that's something that you're just aware of. So the timing for your internet windows is never going to be the same. It's always shifting on you. It's just, like I said, it ends up being a big focus while you're there. So, because we're all very connected.
Yeah. And then Gianmarco asked, what are some of the scariest emergencies that you had to deal with?
We just had scares. So we had people that would present with a syncopal event, near syncope, chest pain. But I think Dr. Wortley may have been planning or could maybe comment on other things that he saw. We were very fortunate our winter where we did not have a lot of serious medical conditions that we had to address.
Yeah, we had Becky was the oldest man on station, who ran our power plant, had a TIA. He woke up one morning, had double vision, falling to his left side, ignoring his left side. And, if it all clears within 24 hours, we call it a TIA. If it's 24 hours, we call it a CVA, and his cleared after 21 hours. But that was kind of scary, because we kind of need him to keep the power on. Um, a lot of orthopedic things. I had someone tear an Achilles tendon playing pickleball in the gym. So yeah, but we didn't have any real bad life and death things, fortunately.
Yeah. And then TJ asked sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I was gonna say, TJ asked another good question. What kind of surgical emergencies are you expected to handle? Eric, you have experience with, neurosurgery, but, most EM docs don't know how to drill a burr hole. I don't think I would be able to do that on the fly.
Yeah, you are kind of expected to do the best you can in any given situation. So there is the telecommunications capability there. There's a video teleconference right there in the clinic. And I believe the protocol would be that all of the station bandwidth, all the internet bandwidth would be shut down to everybody else except you. You would have the full speed of, the full bandwidth for everything to be able to be connected to your consultant to try to walk you through whatever it is that you need to handle to the best of your ability. Because if that's the reason that we're there, is those life-threatening type of things. So if if you can't do it, then it's not going to happen. And you're the best person to be able to try.
And if you wanted telemedicine, it has to be during that 4-hour window with the good satellite pass.
Yeah.
Of
So
course.
everybody has to plan their emergencies accordingly.
Yeah. And then a question for you, Eric, from Huck. How did you manage stepping away from your neurosurgery career to work in the pool?
I mean, that's a good question. The allure, the draw of being at the South Pole really eclipsed anything like any ideas about building a big long-standing career. You'll when you start telling people what you're thinking about doing, it was really split 50-50, maybe 50-50, where half of the people you tell their faces are just going to light up. They're going to think that's so cool. They're going to ask you all kinds of questions and they're going to be so excited for you. And the other half is going to look at you and just say, why? Why would you want to do that? And so you find those people that are going to be really excited about what you're doing, and you sort of gravitate towards them. Because for me, it was more of the lifestyle, the overall life goals that won out for me.
Thank you. I think that's it for now, Dr. Wortley, if you want to get to your next presentation.
Okay, can you see my screen, Antarctic Medical Clinic Operations?
Yes.
Okay, for the most part, doing what I did for, 30, 40 years, that doing the medicine was the easy part. It was all the other things that you have to do that, that I found challenging. Now, I made a little almost 4-minute long video, a tour of the South Pole Clinic. Only problem is we can't figure out how to share the sound on it. So I'm going to kind of talk our way through this next video thing, and you'll see our clinic. That's South Pole Station, and what you will see here next. Okay, you all cannot hear that, right? Okay, that is me. That's Catherine Dudley, who was my PA for the winter, and that's John Rose, who was the outgoing summer physician. And we're going to give you a little tour of the South Pole Station. Here we are entering the clinic, which is on the main floor. And you come in, and here is our main treatment area. This is just like a major bay in the ER. We can handle pretty much anything. We have ventilators if needed. In fact, the station had 3 or 4 ventilators. We have IV pumps. We have a crash cart, just like back in the States, with all the meds and chest tubes, central lines, anything you could need for intubation, including video scopes, are ready there right as we need it. We could image using the X-ray as well as the ultrasound, and Eric gave us some idea of that. And over here is our processor that we would use to uplink back to the University of Texas Medical Branch when we had satellite coverage. Now, when we didn't have satellite coverage, we could use the Iridium satellite phones that for the most part worked really well. This is our video conferencing, which we could use during those hours when we had a good satellite up over the horizon. We could talk back to Texas and to other clinics. This is our dental chair, and I made a joke in this that I hope I never have to use any of those skills. Unfortunately, the joke was on me, and we'll talk about that later. This is our lab, which Eric probably had much better pictures than me. We could do a lot of basic labs there. There's our iStat. Here's our pharmacy. We could treat just about anything. We had everything from malaria to HIV drugs in there. This is our slit lamp for look at eyes. And this was our 2-bed inpatient unit. Usually when you kept someone inpatient, one of us had to stay in the clinic and be the nurse. This was our striker stretcher and go bags for emergencies inside the clinic. And one perk of working in the clinic is we probably had the best view on station. Looking out that window, that is the South Pole right outside our window, or at least it's the ceremonial South Pole. But it's a beautiful view. Then there was a somewhat more private office. This was another exam room. You know, you could do pelvic exams if need be. And this was my computer workstation, and that is our medical library. And that is a view of South Pole Station Clinic. Now, a lot of the unusual duties, which most of us really never have any training in, but I probably did more of these things than I did regular routine medicine. There's kind of 4 basic areas: public health, occupational health, dental, and pharmacy management. For public health, every month we did a food service inspection. This is very much just like a health department restaurant inspection. It's 5 pages long, single space. You have to check temperatures in the refrigerators and freezers, look at their logbooks, make sure the dish sanitizer's up to temperature, make sure that the hot foods on the line are hot and the cold foods are kept cold. And like I say, it's like a health department restaurant inspection, and you do it once a month. Now, at the pole, I didn't have to do water testing because we had a dedicated water plant operator, but at Palmer Station, for the 7 months I was there, once a month I had to do water quality testing. 3 faucets were picked at random, and I had to do coliform cultures every month on 3 different 3 different sites on station. And to come and go from Palmer Station, you can only go by icebreaker, and the icebreaker would arrive about every 4 to 6 weeks. And whenever the icebreaker was docked with us, I had to go do water cultures on 2 different sites on the ship. Outbreak management is something that I learned. When I was at the pole a year ago, there was a COVID epidemic going on at McMurdo. In fact, I think they had 250 cases at McMurdo that summer season. But the pole had managed to avoid that by quarantining people before they arrived. Unfortunately, 2 days after I got to the pole, all hell broke loose, and we had our first COVID case. And in the next 2 weeks, we had 17 people out of the 90 people on station come down with COVID, which was a little trickier at the pole because we're already at high altitude and everyone's already a little bit hypoxic. So we had to figure out, how do we quarantine people? How do we feed those people? How long is long enough? Everyone on station had to mask, and once we thought it was controlled, what do we have to do to convince ourselves that it's safe to unmask? I think Eric, when he arrived, we were still quarantining newcomers for 5 days. The galley, the dining hall, would open 15 minutes early, and they would file through and get their meal tray and then go back to their meals to eat. They were really only allowed out of their room to go outside. So with Eric and Howard, who was the physician, I'd kind of take them out every day for a walk just so we didn't go too stir crazy. You have to do emergency training and planning. There is a emergency response team, and these are not necessarily medically trained people. They're astronomers, they're cooks, they're power plant mechanics. But sometimes you're going to need extra hands, And when there's an emergency, you're glad you have those people, but you have to train them. Palmer Station had a medical response team, but Palmer Station's located on the ocean with a big glacier behind us. So we also had an ocean search and rescue team, and we had a glacier search and rescue team. And I had to provide a little bit of training and supply the medical supplies and make sure everything worked together. The other thing that was unique to Palmer Station is they have Antarctica's only outdoor hot tub, which was kind of nice to have during the stay there. But there was a journal article maybe 10 years ago that looked at all 3 U.S. Antarctic stations, and it broke down the various organ systems with diagnoses and whatever. And for some reason, Palmer Station had a huge spike in skin infections. And the thought was that that was probably due to the hot tub not being maintained well. And so they made it in the policy that the physician, 3 times a week, I had to measure the pH, the total alkalinity, and the bromine levels and keep it within range. Now, I always kept the bromine levels a little bit high, and people would complain that I was like bleaching out their swimsuits, but we never had a single skin infection the whole 7 months. Occupational health. This was also at Palmer, where we had a lot of laboratory stuff and chemicals there. Every month I had to check all the eye wash stations, make sure that they worked. And there were some buildings where we had eye wash stations where we didn't have plumbing, and we would have, like jugs of water in there with preservatives in them, and I would have to change that out. We had AEDs placed around the station and in the outbuildings. And every month you'd have to go out and check the AED, make sure it turned on, make sure it worked, make sure the batteries were okay, and make sure that the pads were in date. Have to go around and find all the first aid kits on station and make sure that they're stocked and things are fresh. At Palmer Station, we had to do respirator mask fit testing. This was for the fire crew to make sure their fire masks fit. And any of you that have been like fitted for like an N95 mask, they put the big bag over your head and they squirt the bad tasting stuff in, and you see if you can smell it or taste it. I had to do that for the fire crews. And these are all important, but they weren't things I was ever trained to do in medical school. Next is dental care. When you go to orientation, and they give you, there's 2 1-hour PowerPoint presentations on how to be a dentist if you have to. Does that sound scary? Yeah, damn right it was scary. Now, I was really fortunate. My first deployment at Palmer Station, I had 0 dental problems to deal with. And I thought, okay, this is wonderful. When I was at the pole, though, for the winter, I had 2 people that had fillings fall out that I had to replace. I had one person had a crown come off and we had to re-cement that back on. And then with a month to go, we had someone who broke off a molar who really needed a root canal and a crown made, but I wasn't going to attempt that. And then talking to our dental consultant, we were able to do a temporary patch until he could get back to the States and get a proper root canal and crown made. You have to learn the dental exam. And what was helpful on my way passing through to McMurdo, there's a dentist at McMurdo for at least a month or a month and a half each summer. And I was fortunate to meet up with him, and he showed me the exam. And when you have the little, you see a dark spot on the tooth and you wonder, is that a cavity? That's why you have that little picker probe. If it's just a stain, it's solid. And if it's a cavity, it really feels soft. And having someone walk me through that and learning what that feels like was good. Fortunately, I didn't have to deal with any cavities. But and not only, Eric showed our X-ray machine, we also have to do our own dental X-rays. Like when the person broke the tooth off, our dental consultant wanted me to do dental X-rays so he could see what we needed to do. And like I said, you need to be able to do a few repairs, basic repairs. Now, what is nice is all 3 the dental carts at all three stations are completely identical how they're set up. So I could be on the Iridium satellite phone, which could be anytime because that doesn't require the three main satellites. And I could talk to our dental consultant and describe things, and he would say, okay, go to the second drawer on the left, midway back, you'll find this, get one of those. Next, go to the top drawer in the middle, right in the front, you'll want one of those. And they were able over the sat phone to kind of talk me through these repairs. And it worked out pretty well. Next thing, I think Eric mentioned that you want to, thank your pharmacist. Well, thank your dentist, also thank your pharmacist. You got to do inventory management, rotating stock, using the older stock, and then you got to know how much you have so that you can order supplies for, what's going to outdate, what's going to get used up, but order things for the next season. The other thing that was with the pharmacy is the controlled substances. We had a ton of controlled meds there in case you need it. I think the amount of propofol we had could be measured by in gallons. But if you had someone on a vent for over a month until you could do a medevac, you're going to need that to keep them, sedated if they're intubated or if you're doing surgery. And, we had pain meds and benzodiazepines and, anything you would need. Every month we would have to do the NARC count where the physician and the PA, we'd look in the logbook, how many pills we should have, we count it out, and it better matched what it is, and it always did. What always was kind of hard to me, if we had say a full bottle of oxycodone, 100 pills, and the seal was on, we didn't have to count the 100 pills. You open it to take 5 pills out, and now you got to count out 95 loose pills every month. The other thing with the controlled substances, when the new meds would come in, you would have to destroy the old meds. And that's a lot of DEA paperwork. We needed 4 people there to all witness this. And then you have to dispose of it in a proper way and document it for the DEA. And how we disposed of it, every little morphine ampule, we would have to break the glass ampule open, pour it out. Every vial of propofol we would have to aspirate. We'd dump it in the bucket, and then we would take it down to the machine shop where they had drums of waste oil, and we would dump these medicines into the waste oil, and that was eventually be shipped back to the States to be disposed of. Now, another thing, and this is the emergency drug cache. When we would get new drugs in and drugs would outdate, we would throw many of those away. They'd go in a drum, and eventually they would be transported back to the U.S. to a hazardous materials dump and be disposed of. But what happens if disaster strikes and the medical clinic burns down, or that section of the station is destroyed? Well, there is a portion in the South Pole Station which is referred to as the lifeboat. It's the B1 wing, and it's kind of isolated, and underneath it, it has its own generator. It has its own way to melt snow for water. It has its own food supply. It has its own radio communications, and it has triple thick firewalls so that if the station was destroyed, at least this one little section could house us, for a month until help could arrive. So we would have an emergency cache of drugs put there. So it's kind of a mind game thinking, okay, what kind of things might I really need? But you're very limited on space. And so you're trying to decide, okay, which antibiotics and how much do I bring? How much IV fluid do I store there? How many Band-Aids? And every year the emergency drug cache would be redone because you would throw the really old stuff out, and then the newly outdated drugs you would add to the emergency cache. Fortunately, we never had to do anything with that. And then there's various community duties. If you're going to go to the South Pole or or Palmer, you're going to wash dishes. You don't have to do that at McMurdo because they have enough staff there to wash dishes. But at the pole, you got to wash dishes, you got to clean bathrooms, you got to shovel snow and do whatever needs done. I understand once a few years ago at the South Pole, they had a doctor who said, I didn't go to medical school to wash dishes. Well, yeah, maybe you didn't, but you went to the pole, so you're going to wash dishes. It's all, and I think Eric pointed out, you get in the middle of the winter season, we've all seen each other's viruses. There really isn't any infectious disease going around. And there's actually very little to do. Once we went 3.5 weeks without a single clinic visit, but we were still washing dishes, cleaning bathrooms, shoveling snow, doing drug inventories, etc. And then there's other kind of volunteer activities. You got a chance to help the NOAA people go out and launch weather balloons. I always thought that was fun. I don't know, Eric, if you ever got a chance to help launch a few balloons. Sometimes you're asked to do safety watch. If someone's crawling into a confined space, you need to have someone outside that space to watch them to make sure they're okay. Or if someone is welding or soldering, with a plumber, someone has to stand behind him with a fire extinguisher in case a spark ignites something. At Palmer Station, we had a lot of research divers and an opportunity to dive tent. Go out with the divers, and you would stand in the front of the boat and kind of point at where their bubbles are coming up. Because sometimes the current is taking the divers underwater in one direction, and the wind is blowing us in another. So you want to stay on top of the divers, and you also want to keep your eyes out for leopard seals. Leopard seals eat people, and there was a diver killed down the coast from us at Rothera, the British station, about 10 years ago. So you're always kind of watching for the leopard seals. And if you see a leopard seal, you put this horn in the water and you blow it, and that tells the diver, I got to get the heck up out of here now. It probably also sounds like the dinner bell to the leopard seal. And the diver would surface quickly, and then normally when you bring a diver in the boat, they'd hand their specimen bag, then they'd hand up their weight belt, and then they'd take their tanks off, and then you would pull them in the boat. Because if you had a 150-pound diver, when they're fully dressed out in their dry suits and tanks and everything, they're going to weigh about 300 pounds. But there's no time to have them remove their tanks. You just pull this 300-pound diver into the boat as quick as you can. And this does happen quite often. They keep track of this. One dive in 9 at Palmer Station is interrupted by a leopard seal alert. So yeah, that will get the heart pumping fast and the adrenaline flowing when you see a leopard seal coming towards the diver. Also at Palmer Station, we would be on radio watch. Sometimes our radio tech would be off repairing something, and they needed someone, to kind of man the radio for emergency calls on station or calls to us from ships. And you also have to be kind of the repairman for your own equipment and other people's equipment. I think I got a few pictures here. Yeah. Okay, this is from Palmer Station, and that's not the sun, that's the moon. And every Friday morning, I would hike up there with a radio tech up to the top of the glacier where we had a radio repeater, and we would shovel out the radio repeater and service it. I didn't have to do that, but heck, it got me out into some beautiful territory and doing something physical. Did I mention that we had to shovel snow? This was Palmer Station on the coast, so it snowed a lot there. And everyone had their assigned area to shovel, and every morning after breakfast, you were expected to shovel out your part of the station. And then the picture next to that is our dental cart, which had a piece of plastic pipe break, so we didn't have suction. So we figured out where the break was. We took it apart. We got some super glue and we repaired it. And now we had a functioning dental cart. That's me launching a weather balloon off to the stratosphere that will go up 100,000 feet, and it will measure the ozone concentration. The other picture is out dive tending, helping the divers get their gloves on and gear on and whatnot. This is Palmer Station's infamous hot tub, which 3 times a week I would have to adjust the chemistries. And the other picture with the blue bag, I guess I don't want to give you the wrong idea what goes on at the South Pole, but that's a big bag of condoms. And in every male and female bathroom, there was a discreet little bowl with condoms. Now, throughout the whole winter, I can tell you that almost none were used, none were needed. But when you get 2 weeks from when the winter crew leaves, all of a sudden these things disappear. And, I refilled those. I probably distributed 200 condoms in the course of about a week and a half. And I think because when people leave, Palmer Pole, they're going to South America, Argentina, they're going to New Zealand, Australia, Bali, Thailand. I think, people just brought them in case they needed them when they traveled. But yeah, that was another physician duty. Hey, Eric, did Howard have to, or you have to do the condom distribution, or did they stop doing that?
I think our crew wasn't quite as energetic as yours. We didn't have any big dips in our supply.
Yeah, we had no dip during the 9 months, but boy, for the 2 weeks before people leave, those bowls were being emptied on a regular basis. And I think that's about all I have to say right now.
I think I put a question in the chat, but I think I saw a couple other questions in there. Bree, do you want to ask the question? You placed it.
Yeah, so I can only imagine how difficult it is to live with your patients, but also like their patients, but their friends. How do you deal with that dynamic of treating people that you're getting to know and, maintaining that doctor-patient relationship on one end,
Yeah.
but also, a friendly relationship on the other end?
Yeah. You have to get along with your coworkers there, and there was only 42 of us there. You couldn't be too aloof, but you didn't want to be manipulated either. I was a family physician in a small town for many decades, and that was much the same as being at South Pole Station. People would come knocking on my door at night at home, um, in Virginia, and people would call you all hours of the night. You just have to kind of in your mind set those barriers, but that gets to be a thin line. Yeah, but I'm not sure what more I can say about that. I think you get to know people pretty well, and that can be a good thing. One of the weird things that they have at the South Pole is something called winter over syndrome. And this is a well-documented thing where people become forgetful, depressed, lethargic, slow. And there's been many articles written on this. It's also called polar T3 syndrome because a lot of people that winter at the pole, their serum T3 will actually go low. And the thought is that the thyroid hormone gets consumed in thermogenesis, trying to stay warm. And the symptoms of winter over syndrome, polar T3 syndrome, is actually hypothyroidism of the central nervous system. That's been debated because how low your T3 goes does not correlate with how bad your symptoms are. But getting to know someone and seeing when they're depressed, I really think the real cause of it is just social isolation and the loss of the day-night variation. That's something which NASA is very interested in. And I don't know, Eric, did NASA do any experiments with your winter over crew? Because we were doing salivary cortisol levels and sometimes drawing T3 levels, and NASA was trying to figure out if there were predictors of who might come down with this, because it would be the same thing if you're taking a trip to Mars in a spaceship. But I guess I brought that out as like knowing your people, and and being able to read their emotions is important when you're a provider at the pole. Eric, you do anything with NASA the year you were there?
Yeah, we had two studies ongoing throughout the winter. One of them was to be applied to the missions to Mars coming up in a couple of
Yeah.
years. That was the virtual reality study where we had folks use these virtual reality headsets to go to these other, beautiful locations, kind of immerse yourself in that to then answer subjective questionnaires about your current mood and state of well-being, as well as collecting objective vitals data through a wrist monitor. So they would be like 5 to 15-minute clips, and the idea was to see if we could combat some of the symptoms of the extreme isolation, to then apply it to those guys that are going to be in the 3-month-long shuttles headed out to Mars. That was the first study, which was a pretty big one. And then the second study we did was to be applied to the upcoming lunar missions. And it was a team dynamics study. So we were looking at interactions between this people with diverse backgrounds that have to function together in these little teams. Everybody has their own job, as with the lunar missions. But then they've got to come together and work together. So it was an idea about how to best put people together, or help them learn or grow together as a team to function. And that's all through the Harvard Medical School. So there's some really cool researchers there that are doing lots of work with NASA, and directly with like the spacesuits. And so it was really cool people to get to meet and interact with, and build connections with.
Awesome.
There's a lot of cross-pollination between the space program and the Antarctic program. At least 3 of the current astronauts are Antarctic veterans, and Christina Cook, who has wintered at Palmer and wintered at Pole, and I think she spent something like 360 days at the International Space Station. When she was on the International Space Station, many people at the pole knew her from her winter at the pole, and the astronauts are each allowed a 30-minute call home to their friends each week. And her call, we hooked up video and we had a 30-minute tour of the International Space Station with Christina, where, about a third of the people on station knew her from when she was at the pole. Christina is also on the next mission to the moon. She will be the first woman to circle the moon. Christina Cook, and we're all rooting for Christina.
That's awesome. Well, Dr. Gardner had a good question about, what medical record system do you guys use at the base, and how is medical liability handled?
The medical record is actually fairly simple. It's basically a Microsoft Word program where you type in history of chief complaint, history of present illness, past medical history, review of systems, exam as need be, or what you do. Remember, we're not billing for anything, and so often our medical record system is really a billing platform. You just have to document what's needed documented. Do a good job, state what's medically important, but you're not playing any insurance games. Is this a 99213, or can I get a 14 out of this visit if I document a few more things? You don't have to do that. Now, it all has to be encrypted, and then it's uploaded back to Texas. And our medical director, Dr. McKeith, he actually reads every note that's written in every station. And sometimes you'll get a little bit of feedback, but it's actually is a much easier medical record system to deal with than Epic or Cerner or any of those other things. Medical liability, we're employees of the University of Texas Medical Branch. They provide our insurance. I'm not aware. I've never heard of a single suit coming out of the Antarctic program. I think people are just so doggone thankful that we're there, you know. you know, freezing our butts off to save theirs, I think is kind of the motto of the Antarctic medical crew.
Thanks. My wife was explaining what a 99213 was. In the emergency department, we just have Epic to sort all that out.
Yeah.
Hey, Bree, do you want to run us through in a second, unless does anybody have any questions for George quick? She was going to work us through an article about medical evacuation. Any questions about for Eric or George before we move on? And feel free to keep putting things in the chat. I think that's a good way to keep us on task and not leave anybody on any questions unanswered.
Alrighty. So the article for this month is Challenges of Air Medical Evacuation from Antarctica. It was done by two authors, Mills and Mills. And I think this is really relevant to all we're talking about because you guys have mentioned overwintering and how difficult evacuation is, slash, nigh impossible sometimes for months in the winter. So what they did was take 6 questionnaires. They sent out questionnaires to pilots and medics working on the air evac crews. And they got 6 back. So they combined the questionnaire results as well as the research from prior studies and everything. Dustin, I apologize, your mic is on.
Sorry.
No worries. So there are 80 research stations in Antarctica. Half of these aren't staffed over the winter at all. So quite a few close and there's no overwintering crew. So like George and Erica mentioned, when they are open, they run a really small skeleton crew. There's hundreds of people during the summer and then there's only, a handful during the winter. So they were looking at between 1998 and 2001, there were 11 emergent evacuations between those. There were a couple of urgent and non-urgent, but 11 emergent. So like they mentioned, there's 6 months of darkness and the winters from February to October when flights are generally banned, actually. There are tons of challenges, including just very few man-made lights. These flights are not using instrumentation to land. They're using visual cues and sights. So the nature of not having a lot of actual light and, like you said, there's only really red lights because it'll mess with the other instruments. So one story is in the winter of 1999, Dr. Nielsen, she actually diagnosed breast cancer on herself and they couldn't evac her, but they were able to drop supplies in like chemo and everything for 4 months. So she was able to start her treatments and not postpone. So the planes themselves, they need a good weather window for at least 10 hours plus turnaround time. So the weather in Antarctica is prone to extreme fluctuations. Like Dr. Wortley mentioned, the weather balloons can help, but there's not a lot of weather stations in Antarctica. So getting that data is, very sparse and it can be unreliable and change really quickly. So freezing temperatures can immobilize an aircraft itself. Anything less than like 50 degrees Celsius, like -50, the plane physically can't fly. It will be immobile from the cold. And as I mentioned before, there are very few like proper landing sites. There's not really like a tarmac or anything to land on. A lot of it is landing on snow and ice. Some of the landing sites even float away towards the end of summer. Like it's a sheet of ice and then the ice goes away with the flow. And like I mentioned, all of these landing sites require visual identification. So if the weather is too cloudy or too cold or anything is a little bit wrong, the flights just aren't safe to go in or out. The study also mentioned that now there are lots of commercial and recreational visits to Antarctica, typically around the coastal areas. People aren't really going, inland to the South Pole very much. But a lot of these are quite, the percentage of older people is over 50%. So you have a lot of people with, medical comorbidities that are visiting a place that's incredibly remote where they may not be rescued from for a while. They even mentioned that one tourist was bitten by a fur seal, probably, thinking it was cute and friendly. And there you go. Now you have a seal bite of, I'm sure that can be incredibly bad / near amputation. So ultimately, it talked about some of the complexities of evacuation and why, when you choose your winter staff, you have to really, choose good people who ideally are going to be able to work together, who can withstand the social isolation and the hardships of, working every day and bearing through that. Because, like Dr. Wortley and Eric said, once you're in there, you're really not able to get out. Oh, yeah. It's an enjoyable article. Any questions about it?
Hey, George, it looks like you're muted
Yeah.
as opposed to when I forgot to unmute myself.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to add a little thing on medevacs. At Palmer Station, you can't land a plane. They have to come by icebreaker from South America. Depends where the ship is. At the pole in summertime, okay, the nearest hospital to the South Pole is actually in New Zealand, 3,000 miles away. McMurdo is a little bit bigger than, a lot bigger than the pole, but it's still not a hospital. Their little insight I had is about 8 years ago, they had a woman at the pole in the winter who had a bowel obstruction. They watched it for 2 weeks. It was not releasing, so they made the decision to go ahead and medevac her. It took about 2 weeks. There are planes that can fly in that cold. They're called twin engine otters, and they have heaters on the fuel tanks and on the hydraulics. And they're used a lot in Antarctica in the summer. And then during the Antarctic winter, they head up to northern Canada. So if you need a medevac, and they're run by a company called Ken Boric Air, and they're skilled bush pilots and they fly these. If you need a medevac, they have to find 2 crews because you need another plane to go with it in case that plane ditches. And they have to then find 2 crews willing to do it because it is dangerous. They would fly down the coast from Canada, down North America, South America, make the jump over to the peninsula, the British base at Rothera, and then wait for a window. The South Pole gets ready by getting the graders out there and the machinery and trying to knock down the snow drifts. To light the runway, they bring some oil drums, light the oil on fire to provide outside lights. And when they did it, they found the weather window, they flew in, they picked the woman up, and they flew back to South America and got her to a hospital in Santiago, Chile, just when the bowel obstruction decided to release. And she wound up not needing surgery. But that medevac cost $5 million and it put 12 people's lives at risk. Also, a problem when it's cold is that the coefficient of friction on the skis go up. I could cross-country ski at the pole, and glide, but once it got colder than 60 below, you just don't glide on skis. You might as well be wearing snowshoes. And even though they had graded a 2-mile long runway, at the end of the runway, that plane was not still fully airborne, and it was skimming over the top of the drifts. It was scary. That plane almost crashed on takeoff from the pole. So you have to think long and hard before doing a medevac. Now, summer's a little bit different because if the weather's all right, there's 4 flights a day from the pole down to McMurdo, and 1 or 2 flights from McMurdo back to Christchurch, New Zealand every day, weather permitting.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. If no one else has any questions, I think we'll move on to Teresa to talk about some of her experiences. Oh, Teresa, you're muted.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Just actually real quick before I get into what I wanted to talk about, at McMurdo, when I was there last season, we did have we were helping manage a medevac that was actually from the Palmer boat, and it was pretty interesting because we got to work with a whole coordination of care with not just the U.S. bases, but actually an Australian base as well, which was pretty wild, and it involved a lot of moving parts, which was exciting, but maybe not quite for the patient. It was an upper GI bleed for someone that was working on one of the I guess it was a government boat, but because McMurdo is a lot bigger and we have a lot more resources than or capabilities, I suppose, than the South Pole, it kind of seemed to come to us. But yeah, it was a I think it was probably close to a 4-week evacuation for that patient, and the patient went by boat to the base, the Australian base, and then I think he ended up going again by boat to back to Perth, in the western part of Australia. So it was pretty exciting. All right, I am going to talk. I know George and Eric did a pretty good job of discussing life on the station and medicine in general, but I'll share a little bit about my time at McMurdo. And I wasn't a winter over, so I was there during the shoulder season, which was from February to May, the very beginning part of May. And as they mentioned at the pole, the planes are gone at February, but at McMurdo, because you're that much further north or south, depending on how you look at it, I guess north, the planes are able to fly in and out a little bit later in the season. So my time was from February, and then I took the very last flight out of there at the very beginning of May. So the shoulder season, we were staffed. I'm going to try to, let's see if I can get this to work here. Oh, how do I share my screen? I think it was there the same time that Eric was there. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think you came in after I had left McMurdo to head down to the pole, and then you got to hang out with couple of cool people that did some like onboarding stuff with your doc and PA that you were there with.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So like Eric said, we had one doc, and then there was 2 PAs because McMurdo gets really busy during that shoulder season when a lot of people are coming, a lot of people are going, and there's still plenty of planes that are able to fly on and off the ice. So I think I'm sharing the screen. And like I said, I'll go over some things about my time in Antarctica, and then I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I was asked to talk about locums work, which is like travel PA work that I do. So here we go. Da, da, da. Hopefully you guys can all see that. Loading. All right. So not unlike Palmer and South Pole, we had a really small emergency type room, and we would see patients just as they described on a regular. At McMurdo, there's significantly more people. I think in the summer it can get up to about 2,000 people, and that comes with the military that arrives as well. But in the shoulder season, there was about maybe 175 people on the station. Briefly talk about PA roles. Here in this picture, we were conducting training for our mass casualty incident team. So like Eric mentioned before, that's, in case of a mass casualty incident where, I don't know, a truck rolls over or something happens with a lot of people, we need more than just the 3 of us medical professionals as all hands on deck. And we're training, galley workers and sparkies and electricians and all sorts of people that have no medical background, a little bit about medicine. So in this picture, we've got the PA and the doc that are just showing how to do blood pressures, and we taught them how to draw blood and all sorts of fun things. They even learned how to take x-rays and do ultrasounds and stuff. Ultrasounds, there you go. A lot of times it was pretty quiet, so we would just practice doing ultrasounds for fun. We would rotate on call. I'm guessing it was probably pretty similar for you guys, George and Eric, but we'd rotate being on call every 3 nights, and as a PA there, that was also one of our shared roles and responsibilities. We also consulted for Scott Base was the Kiwi base that was about 2 miles over the hill, and that was the New Zealand base. They had a medic that was over there, but if there was something that they were more concerned about, then they'd take a walk over the hill, and we would also see their patients as well. This was again part of their mass casualty incident training. We did it was pretty fun actually. We trained our teams for about a month and a half, and then we chose a date and did an entire full day scenario, which involved the fire department, it involved the SAR team, their search and rescue team, it involved our team, our MCI team, and then obviously the providers, which was it was an all-day thing, and it was actually really exciting. And considering most of the folks had zero medical background, it went remarkably smooth. So this is just part of the fire team bringing in our fake patient. That's just again, it's pretty similar to down at South Pole, but we had 4 beds in our emergency, and then we had a ward, our inpatient ward, that had maybe 8 beds. Thankfully, when I was there for the shoulder season, we didn't have to use the inpatient ward, although the day that I arrived, there was a patient with acute appendicitis that ended up getting not medevaced, but just sent out on the plane that was leaving the next day, and he had his appendix removed in Christchurch that following day, which was exciting. I mean, lucky for him. So I was going to talk a little bit about station life. McMurdo's a lot bigger than South Pole and Palmer. It's big, and there's a lot of activities, a lot of social events too, especially because we're closely connected with the New Zealand base over the hill, Scott Base. How do you entertain yourself when you're not working? A lot of games. Scrabble. There's a chess club. The big thing was cribbage. I had never knew how to play cribbage until going down to Antarctica. McMurdo has a rock wall much bigger than the South Pole boulder wall. That actually has ropes and stuff that you tie into, which is pretty fun. A pretty big gym for pickleball and basketball. And this climbing wall is actually over at the Scott Base. And you were allowed to go over to the Scott Base once a week for what they called American Night. And it's just more of a social gathering than anything else. So the galley is pretty much a hot spot for any sort of social engagements, whether it's speaker presentations from the scientists that were there, or game night, as you can see, or just really just hanging out. And the galley was awesome. The workers and everything in there were top notch. There's 3 meals a day, and they had a huge Sunday brunch that we would invite the Scott Base folks over for, and 24 hours access to food and hot drinks and stuff. So other things to do, McMurdo's a lot it's a lot bigger, like I said. That's just part of what you can see from the top of what we like to call Observation Hill. It's a maybe a mile hike up to one of the little points that you can get a good view of McMurdo there. But there's other hikes, there's other loops that you could do, and during the summer there's a lot less restrictions as to what you're able to do by yourself, and what becomes a little bit more unsafe as the weather gets worse. But hiking over to Scott Base, hiking around Ob Hills, good views of the ice, the Ross ice shelf, and you're able to see penguins and seals and whales when the ice hasn't set in. I'm a huge fan of that hike. Good spot for sunrises and sunsets, which are particularly cool in the shoulder season. It's a little grainy. I'm sorry it didn't turn out quite as I expected, but that's a view of the Scott Base. Significantly smaller than our American station, but definitely it's pretty neat to be able to go over there and see how things are run on the Kiwi side of things. Mountain range in the back is called the Royal Society. McMurdo's pretty unique in that, unlike the South Pole, which is pretty flat, we have a lot of variation to the terrain. We're basically sitting on a giant volcano, Mount Erebus, which is pretty cool because you can still see it smoking pretty almost every day, I think. Yeah, you can't go without seeing getting another aurora picture, but that's the aurora over McMurdo. Probably one of my favorite shots, actually. Let's see. That's what I have on Antarctica. If anyone had any questions before I switched gears to locums, I am happy to take any questions. I see there's one in the chat, I think.
Yeah, I think it was for me. And this can be to everybody. How do we get these amazing jobs, right? Like, who do we apply to? Who do you have to know? Who do you talk to?
It would,
So, oh, go ahead. I don't know who I just interrupted.
hey, it would be the University of Texas Medical Branch Center for Polar Medical Operations. Dr. James McKeith is the head of that. But University of Texas Medical Branch Center for Polar Medical Operations. I think there's also PAs up in Greenland at Summit Station, and I think that goes through the University of Colorado. But I've never worked for them, so I don't exactly know. But Colorado has the contract for Greenland. Texas has the contract for Antarctica.
I thought it was both. I thought Texas had the contract for both, but you, George, you probably know better than I do on that
You
one.
know, I think Texas does the medical clearances, but I think the employees up there at Summit are actually through Colorado. That's what I heard.
Cool. Yeah,
That was my experience also, is that the University of Colorado has the stranglehold in the north, UTMB is in the south. And their whole residency program, I believe, or at least the folks interested in emergency or wilderness medicine, they rotate up there and they could do short little trips, if I'm not mistaken, like a couple weeks at a time to go staff the Summit Station in Greenland.
Yeah, cool. All right. If there's no other questions for Antarctica, give me the green light to jump ahead to locums work.
Go for it. No, that's all yours, Teresa. Keep going.
Oh, did I just lose you? All right.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back. My Wi-Fi connection is super spotty. I'm in the middle of nowhere in New Zealand, in a car, so I have to do this here. Bear with me. All right. Can you still hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Let me just see if I can.
Hey, Teresa, you there? Uh-oh. Well, she is fixing her connection. Does anybody have any questions about Antarctica? I guess one thing, George, from one of your talks in the past, you mentioned one of the fun intro days is regarding the thing, and then the hot tub to hey, Teresa's back. Hey, Teresa,
I'm back. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Sorry.
After you go, I was gonna allude to a story about the thing George had told me about. We can get back to that after, now that we got you back. So take it away.
All right. All right. All right. Here we go. Sharing the screen. So I was asked to talk a little bit about locums work, and my experience obviously is just as a PA, but how to find jobs, apply to jobs, that kind of thing here. So I have worked as a PA, as a temporary locums worker in Arctic Alaska, Hawaii, and then in New York City. So nice big variation there. I'll talk a little bit about Alaska first. Well, before I go, I'll just say that usually for locums work, how to find a job, I've just honestly done a straight up Google search, word of mouth, and there's recruiters as well that you can contact, mostly through a Google search, and different agencies like locum tenens agencies like Barton Health, Comp Health. They all function as intermediary, basically, to help you find a position. And then, like I said, I mostly just do my own investigation via Google searches, and I prefer to not work with an agency as they kind of don't always look out for your best interest, but to go direct hire. So in Alaska, I've gone direct hire and worked with the Native organizations up there. The organization I worked with was called Manilik Health, and this is a shot here of a really small Native town called Point Hope, which is way up in the Arctic Circle. So yeah, Point Hope, I'll talk a little bit about that first. It's an entirely native town, staffed just by local Alaskan natives. There's only one provider up there at a time. It could be PA, NP, doc, doesn't matter. And then they also have what's called community health aid practitioners. They're called CHAPs. And essentially what they are is just locals of the area that want to help out when there isn't a provider up there. And basically they're trained through the Native organization how to function kind of like as a souped up MA. They can take vitals, they can do really simple procedures, and they're able to video chat with the doctor to say, hey, this is what I have here in the clinic and what should I do. This is Point Hope's it's actually a pretty big town. I can't remember the actual population, but it's got a full-on emergency department here. This is our trauma room. And then there's other like primary care type rooms as well that we see patients on a regular basis too. They had a fire truck ambulance, and unlike some of the other Native villages, Point Hope's a little bit bigger, so they're able to staff an ambulance. And looks like he's about 12 years old, and I'm pretty sure he was only about 15 or 16 years old. But entertaining, and it did help too, because you'll be on call 24/7, and they will bring the patient to you rather than you having to go and make a house call. And like I said, some of the community health aides were available as well for emergencies in Point Hope. It's very remote there. I know you saw the ambulance, and there are some cars, but most of it is really accessible only by ATV and or dog sled. And many times we would be on ATVs or dog sleds to go make house calls and visit people who were unable to come into the clinic. The other town I worked in is called Kivalina, a lot smaller and a lot more, they're not quite as technologically advanced, we'll say. A lot of houses and homes didn't have running water, and the clinic was, I think, only one of a few buildings that actually had running water. I worked here a few times. The first was right after COVID, early 2021. I was actually stuck there for just over a month because the whole village tested positive for COVID. You live and work in the clinic, so my room is quite literally right next to where I would see patients. And you get used to the darkness there as well. On-call solo provider, but we do have medevac capabilities as well. Not too unlike the medevac ability in In Antarctica, this is also really weather based, and the weather based in the Arctic is it fluctuates just as quickly. Typically, a medevac flight, if the weather's good, it can get a patient to the biggest ER, which is in Kotzebue, and that's about an hour and a half flight. If someone was really sick, at a couple patients that needed to go directly to Anchorage, you're looking at maybe a 3-hour flight, and that's really only if the weather permits. And this is us trying to get a patient out to the plane for medevac. But medevac, the flight nurses and everyone, they are top notch up there. They do some pretty intense rescues for sure. One of the hardest things, that's us getting a patient in as well to the medevac, and it's freezing. One of the hardest things about working up in native Alaska is you're dealing with people who have lived there for generations, and they're very much stuck in their ways for a lot of things, which is great, but it also makes it super hard to fit into community, especially as a white female. It takes quite a while to build and gain trust. But once you do, the community is very, very open and friendly and willing to give you time and food as as you need. Here in Kivalina, a lot of families will live together and spend a significant part of their time together. These two folks were teaching me how to prepare and eat walrus, which is not the greatest tasting food, but it was fun to try. Learned a lot from the locals. If you listened and paid attention, they had some interesting ways of treating their own medical issues, things that I had never heard of, putting seal oil on things, and a lot of different remedies. But here's another local that was showing me how to ice fish. And of course, kids and puppies. You can't go wrong with either of those. For spare time, since you're on call as the only provider in the village, it's really hard to really get far away. And you weren't allowed to go too far here just because the risk for polar bears and wolves. You could go out and play around in the town, especially with the kids, and like down the airstrip, but to go further than that was really not recommended, especially by yourself. Definitely not. Sunsets and sunrises in the Arctic are pretty cool, and it's a really unique place with a lot of interesting cultural differences, but it's absolutely beautiful. I felt my time in Antarctica compared to the Arctic was similar in a lot of regards, and then definitely different in a lot of others, especially with a community that's very, very native and generations of living in these types of harsh, extreme conditions. I mean, there's not, internet like we had in other parts of Alaska. So I think that was another big thing for communicating as far as medevacs and everything goes too. But oh yeah, so if you don't want to work in really cold places, you can work in Hawaii. I've done a couple contracts as a direct hire through the giant HMO Kaiser Permanente. But I worked as a PA here in family medicine, walk-in care on the Big Island a couple times, and then also most recently on the island of Maui. I don't have a whole ton of pictures of medicine there because I tried to work as little as possible. But clinic life is very much like you would expect in any family medicine clinic. The one cool thing I will say is that, especially on the island of Maui, it's very small community medicine under the giant umbrella of Kaiser Permanente. So it has a very small town feel. People know each other, and the term ohana has never made much more sense than when I worked on Maui. But yeah, it's definitely a nice place to switch up the cold and freezing temps to go to Hawaii and play instead and practice medicine there. In summary, I'd like to just say that look at locums has a lot of benefits, a lot of pluses and minuses. It's cool to be able to work in places for a short amount of time, kind of you can negotiate a contract by saying, hey, I only want to work X amount of days, this amount of hours. You can negotiate pay pretty well, but you don't get benefits. Typically, you're not covered health insurance wise. Yes, there's typically a slightly increased pay option because you don't get those benefits, but also depends on where you work. It's fun. If you like to travel around and see and experience medicine new places, then locums is a pretty neat option for you to do so. And then looking forward, I am right now in New Zealand. I just accepted a 1 to 3-ish year contract working in a really small community hospital here in the town of Gore on the South Island. So I started 2 days ago, but New Zealand definitely has a lot of cool places to do. And as a PA here, it's an exciting time because PAs are unregulated as of right now, which means we don't have the same rights as we do back in the States. I can't prescribe medications unless it's signed off by an MD, but that's been moving forward rather rapidly, so that hopefully within the year, the physician assistant role will be it will be fully regulated and we will function as PAs back in the States. So yeah, stay tuned on that one. Does anybody have any questions about locums work? Thanks.
How was it getting a position across the world in a different practice setting, liability setting, different? I mean, I guess you haven't probably worked much yet, but contractually, how did that change based on what you've done here?
The need for medical providers here in New Zealand is so great. They are I feel like every country says this, oh, we need more doctors, but really they need more doctors here. And especially in some of these rural communities, they don't have enough people that can staff. So I don't want to say they'll take anyone. They'll take any riffraff. But they really do need more docs. And so the PA role has been something so up and coming here for the past 10 years in New Zealand that making that transition between the US and here wasn't that hard as far as the need for providers. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be a PA in New Zealand for sure.
Any questions from some of our students or residents in the group? I know there seem to be a handful of ACPs students that were joined earlier. I don't recognize some names that are still left, but any questions and with Teresa's involvement and how you can do something like what she's done? I think some of them had probably some clinical stuff to get
All
to.
good.
All right. Well, thanks, Teresa. It's a lot of locum stuff we hear from the doc side of things, but I think it's a little bit unique. I don't know many that have done what you've done. And then it looks like Kyla had some questions about licensing and any certification questions.
Yeah. So licensing in New Zealand, no, you don't have to retest. They are happy with a US, any state license in New Zealand. Any state license as long as it's up to date. But yeah, what kind of experience would you recommend? They're really keen on emergency medicine, urgent care, family medicine experience. A lot of places that are needing providers are pretty rural, and there's not a whole lot in the way of emergency rooms as we know it in the States. It's pretty remote. So yeah, I'd say probably the biggest thing would be emergency medicine experience and urgent care type experience. I think they looked at my time in Antarctica as being very valuable as well. So that definitely it didn't hurt to have that experience as well. So.
And I saw the question as far as DO licensing. I mean, again, I have met friends from all over the world who have worked in New Zealand, are working there, or are coming back from there. Like they take a lot of people from all over the world. I know it's really easy from the UK. It's really easy from the US. I
Mhm.
would have to double check, but I doubt that, deal would be any issue.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's changed. I do remember a handful of years back, there was some practice differences for DO capabilities compared to New Zealand versus Australia. A lot of the outside of the US DOs are viewed somewhat between chiropractic and medical provider. I think that's behind where we are in the US here, but I do think it's still somewhat it's still a little bit different. Um, DOMD here in the States has been essentially similar match, similar board exams now, but we're not there yet across the pond. Teresa, while you were working on your internet, I was asking George a question about his stories he's told me in the past about the one of the first day on station that they tend to do to like introduce you to the base. Can you walk us through kind of how it starts, the little tradition you have there?
Okay, well,
At oh, sorry.
okay.
No, either position. He was just telling me a little bit about something they've done where he's been.
Well, when the station closes for the winter, meaning the last flight is gone and it's, just the 42 of us for, for the next 8.5, 9 months, we gather in the gym and they watch The Thing. Now, I had never seen The Thing before going to Antarctica before, and it's a lot scarier when you're actually kind of living in a place that looks a lot like it in the movie. But they showed all three versions. There's a black and white version from the late 1950s, and there's the classic one from '84 with John Carpenter, and then there's another version which is I think about 15 years after the John Carpenter version, but it's just kind of a tradition that they do. And then always on midwinter, which is the big celebration, they usually watch The Shining with Jack Nicholson. Eric, did they do that midwinter when you were there?
We
Where
did. Yep.
Yeah, that's
The Thing movies were the best though.
yeah.
We rearrange, bring all the furniture out of one of our lounges, set up a
Yeah.
projector in the gym so everybody's there together, and then just spend hours in there.
Watching The
So
Thing.
yep.
Teresa, did your base do anything like that?
I think because I was there for such a transitionary time, like right before the winter season officially started, I think that that happened after I left.
Hey, thanks everybody. I got to get on shift now. So thank you so much for letting me share some of this story, and open to any questions for follow-up, like over email or something either through the wilderness group or like Blue Ridge Adventure Medicine. I'd be happy to answer anything I can, but I'm gonna go to work. It was nice meeting everybody.
Yeah, his shift starts in 2 minutes. All right, anybody else have questions for Teresa or George while we have them? Otherwise, I think it looks beautiful where she's at. She's probably gonna go up play.
Thank you all so much for coming to chat with us. Your experiences are invaluable. I'm so excited. I can't wait to hopefully one day do some base medicine. Maybe some other people will be excited too.
Cool.
Well,
Feel free to share contact information too if
Okay.
anyone has any other questions. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, as long as you're all okay with that, I can put your email addresses in the follow-up email in a couple
Yeah,
weeks.
you can go ahead and put mine in. That's good.
Perfect.
Easy.
All right.
Hey,
Well, thanks
thanks.
everybody.
Great.
I looking forward to talking to you guys in your future potential base station endeavors. All right, otherwise, thanks again, and I'll see you all later.